Hello, BookTube. It's October, the scary month, and you're all alone. And I have a disc containing 35 uninterrupted hours of cable news show appearances by Trump apologists. In other words, it's time for terrifying Tuesday TBR torture. I have 6 books I want to show you, and as if that weren't bad enough, I'm adding 2 extra terrifying elements. Number 1, I have read them all instead of just 3 of them, and they're all recommendations. And number 2, they're all behemoths. so prepare yourself. Not that that's possible. First one is the smallest one of them all and the only fiction. We've seen it before, but this is the finished copy. This is a Book of Bones by the great John Connolly. These are supernatural tinged action adventure, very intellectual thrillers about a main character, Charlie Parker, who is, as the Dust Jacket puts it here, he's not afraid of evil, but evil should be afraid of him. He is in one way a typical action adventure star. He's constantly running across people misbehaving in public who need to be corrected. But there are elements to these books that don't have anything in common with other thrillers. The closest I think that you could come to an action-oriented, deeply textured thriller slash slightly preternatural would be the Repairman Jack series. But these books are, no offense at all to the author of Repairman Jack, but these are far more erudite. This book in particular is a feast of traveling. The author often has his main character traveling, and we get a lot of travel in this book, but also very bookish. This is all about, I mean, it's about murder, and it's about the race to prevent more murders, but it's also about rare, mysterious books, and it's terrific, absolutely terrific. It's difficult to synopsize the Charlie Parker books, especially after this many of them, but you don't need to read any others to jump right into this. This is the requisite boring American cover. I don't know what the UK edition will look like. I imagine the UK edition will also come out first in a trade paperback that will show a little bit more length. In the finished copy, this doesn't actually look that long, but it's a big, rich book that has stop-offs in half a dozen locations, and some really, really neat evil for our main character and his cast of add-ons to go up against. And there are toss-off scenes. There are always toss-off scenes. Some of them are funny. Some of them are just our hero being, a tough guy. All of them well done. Connolly has been doing this for a long time. Like I said, there are other books that are sort of similar in a way in terms of subject matter, but none in terms of execution. No one writes this well not even close in this area. Not since P.D. James popped her clogs. So I want to recommend that first. That is the only fiction. Then we're going to get into nonfiction, and they start big, and they just keep getting bigger and bigger. The first one, I can't remember if I have recommended this or not, but I want to recommend it one more time. This is edited by Cliff Eisen and Dominic McHugh, and it's The Letters of Cole Porter. It's coming out from Yale, I think later this month, or maybe November. No, okay, this is late November. So a couple of these are going to break with usually with my TBR tortures. I want to stress that the book is out or imminent, but I thought the theme of the behemoths was too attractive to pass up here. And also, these will be coming out on the doorstep of the holidays, so they might not be just for you. You might also want to mark them as potentials for gifts. And this is just on one level what the title says. The Letters of Cole Porter follows him from the very earliest years when he was struggling all the way to the end when he was a living institution. It is on the one level that, but it is so much more than that. This is a biography of Cole Porter, because our editors don't just present the letters. They present a vast amount of integumentary tissue and a vast amount of notes, footnotes, endnotes, so that this will work just fine as both a book for people who already love Cole Porter and who already love reading letter collections. I'm one of both of those. But also for people who've never read a biography of Cole Porter. It will work just fine for that. It's absolutely terrific. Hope that it gets, in November, I hope that it gets a lot of critical attention prior to the holidays. And this next one is an October book. This comes out in a few weeks. It's also huge. It's by William J. Mann, and it's called The Contender. And it is a gigantic biography of Marlon Brando. and it's amazing. The main reason that it's amazing is that it makes the decision fairly early on. Certainly by the time Brando goes to acting school for the first time, the author seems to me to make the decision to treat Brando as a quasi-fictional character, even as a role. And I think that is just brilliant. I think that works perfectly in a way that stops him from ever getting boring and that keeps him infuriating in a page-turning kind of way, if you know what I mean. If you look at this, I mean, admittedly larger than life. Brando was larger than life almost from the beginning. If you look at him as just an ordinary person, then you're sunk in a sea of venality and what I would consider to be, some outstanding, unmedicated, and fairly severe psychological problems. But if you look at him as a story of the actor, capital letters in italics, as this book often does, it works so much better. So much better. And also, the author, this is not his first walk in the park, and this is his talent for drawing ancillary portraits of all the people in Brando's orbit, all the people touched by him, all the people that knew him or loved him or hated him or didn't know what at all to make of him. There are quite a few of that last category, even now, after all this time. Even now that his filmography is set in stone, and we can go back to it anytime we want, and there have been many biographies, even so, there remains in him, as to a greater degree than almost anybody in Hollywood, an unknowable quality. And this book, to its credit, doesn't seem to think that it can do anything about that. Instead, it just presents that quality. I thought it was mesmerizing. Just mesmerizing. One of the season's best biographies. And there's a massive swamp of biographies coming out. Although I don't have any other biographies in this pile. Now we're going to move on to history. And we'll finish this out with the last three. And the first one is big. Second one is even bigger. Third one is freaking immense. So the first one is This Land is Their Land. And this is by David Silverman. And this is fairly big. This is from who? Bloomsbury? This is the author's big narrative history of the Mayflower landing, of the first Thanksgiving, of all that stuff that is getting an anniversary. 2020 will be, I think, the 500th anniversary or something like that. There'll be a lot of attention. There'll be a lot of retrospective articles. And this book steals a march on all of them by not only telling all of those stories, but blowing them to pieces. This author's contention is that is what the Wampanoags were saying from the beginning. The Wampanoags, the people who met the Pilgrims, were saying from the beginning, the stories you're telling about what happened are obviously not true. Nothing like that happened. And your stories are made for storybooks for children. Your behavior was not anything like what you're describing. This author describes first step, and then the second step, and then the third step, and then the fourth step in what amounted to a slow motion genocide. And I thought it was terrific. Just terrific. Despite the fact that the author takes issue with virtually every pillar of this story as it's ever been told, including in quite a few of the books that I have in my history section, despite the fact that this is, in other words, an angry book on one level, it's also a narrative dream come true. It's just told so wonderfully. So this comes out, I think, this month later on. November 5th. This comes out on November 5th. So the prankish part of me wants to say it's just in time for Thanksgiving. It's especially, I mean, it's interesting anyway, just on as a totally sinus clearing new look at a settled historical topic. But if you are an American, it's virtually required reading. I strongly recommend it. This next one was a big surprise to me. I knew that I was going to like it, or I suspected that I would. Certainly I approved of it, but I had no idea how much I would like it. And I don't know that I'm going to have an easy time explaining why. This is by Charles Emerson, and this is called Crucible. And it's as you can see on the cover, 1917 to 1924. This is a big book. The finished copy is much bigger than the advanced copy. A big look at the end of World War I and the world that followed, the world that flowed from the events of World War I. And as such, we've seen many, many, many books like that. If you read history, then you've seen many, many books like that. This is unlike any of them. And the main reason for that is the narrative choices involved. The author breaks up his story into just a shattered kaleidoscope of views and characters. The segments throughout the book are sometimes only a couple of paragraphs long, so that you're bolting forward, just chapter by chapter, personality by personality. He makes the wise choice of centering on a handful of personalities, and the prose itself is extremely evocative. It's not cheap, it's not manipulative, but it doesn't read like ordinary academic fused history. Not at all. The thing, when I was reading it, the thing that I kept being reminded of was USA by John Dos Passos. I would be amazed if that wasn't a template in the back of the author's mind while he was writing this. USA and Mr. Wilson's War. This seemed very much, it seems very much a sort of ideological, a narrative descendant of those works. So, it's a great big work of history. It's going to be in bookstores in mid-October. There are going to be plenty of people on, whether it's you or somebody on your gift-giving list, there are going to be plenty of people who are going to be interested in this anyway. But it's interesting all the more than that. This is something that I would actually hand to someone who doesn't often read history, and just watch them get consumed by it, because it is absolutely riveting throughout, mainly because of how it's executed, not just the subject matter. Although the author has some really good iconoclastic takes on some of the subject matter. Like I mentioned, there have been quite a few studies of the immediate post-war world, of the world immediately in the shadow of World War I. There have been quite a few studies along those lines. Quite a few is a drastic understatement. I could substitute every single book in this house for a book on that subject, and I would still have plenty more books to go. And the author has quite a few really good insights into that familiar subject matter. So, again, if you really like reading history, don't pass this up. Whether it's a library or the bookstore, don't pass it up. And even if you don't, even if you're thinking, I've always wanted to, maybe there's even a part of you that has always wanted to maybe sink into a giant behemoth work of history, a 600-page chunker, and you're thinking, well, part of me likes the idea of that, but I would be out of my depth in no time. I know that I would be. This is a one to start with. This is if you're in that weird position, this is a place to dig in. I think you will love it, and history readers will love it anyway, and argue with it endlessly. And then the last book, the biggest one of them all. This one is huge. This is we saw, I think, the advanced copy of this. This is David Abulafia's The Boundless Sea. This is a gigantic history of the oceans, of the world. Sort of a human history of the oceans. It is, let's see here, 1,000 pages long, and it comes out in mid-October. I will be reviewing this book for the Christian Science Monitor. I have read it now going on 3 times. I read the advanced copy and then the finished copy, and then I have to scrutinize it again. But it's amazing. It's even better. He wrote a big book on the Mediterranean, and this is even better than that. And that was really good. And of course, there's a level on which this task is impossible. No matter what you do, you're always going to have 10 books this size that you're leaving out. And you have to just acknowledge that, going in. This is just going to be a fraction of the story. But even so, it didn't feel all that fractional. So once again, if we're talking about you, or if we're talking about a potential gift recipient, if you love the sea, if you read maritime history, if you know someone who does, this is the book of the season to have. So there you go. That is a little Tuesday TBR torture. And it's all tomes. It's Tuesday tome TBR torture. This is The Boundless Sea, then Crucible, then This Land is Their Land. Then we have the Contender, the story of Marlon Brando. We have The Letters of Cole Porter, utterly enthralling. Don't let it sounds on the surface like it's a specialist thing, and it's not. And finally, The Only Fiction, a Book of Bones by the great John Connolly, where if you haven't made the acquaintance of John Connolly as a fiction writer, then this is going to be in all of your bookstores. It's going to be in all of your libraries. It's a new release. Give it a try. Don't be put off by the by the list of previous books. You can jump in anywhere, and they're terrific. So there you go. I thought we'd start off the month with a little TBR torture, but I'll be back. Don't you worry. Thank you, Book 2.